Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing the Dilemmas of a Book Nerd tag. So I was tagged by Pauline from Dancing Lawn, and I will leave her video down below as well as the original from the creator of the tag. So there are 10 questions in total, and this is more about your reading habits and how you approach reading rather than specifically your reading tastes. So book 1 is book storage. How do you store and organise your books? So I have 3 bookshelves and 1 book cart currently in my house. The bookshelves that you see behind me are all the books that I have read that are fiction, and I keep them in alphabetical order. And then to the left of me over here there is my non-fiction, there is my to be read shelves. Those aren't in any particular order. I think at the moment they're currently like vaguely genre, but they do get mixed around quite a lot, and my red shelves are kind of slowly but surely creeping up the bottom, and eventually will take over that. I have a book cart down just on the floor by me here, and that one, the 3 levels are just kind of high priority books that I want to get to in the next few months. So I always have my monthly TBR in the very top one, and then loosely what I want to read for the following 2 months underneath, or high priority ones. I also use it to store things like books that I've hauled that I haven't put into a haul video yet. And then finally, in my hallway that I'm not going to take you to, I'm sorry, I really can't be bothered to film through my house, I have a fancier old bookshelf that is actually from my grandparents' house, and it houses my classics and my non-fiction, because they're quite fancy looking books, so they're in the hallway on that shelf. So that is where I currently keep all my books. Question 2 is tracking. How do you keep track of what you have read and what books you own? I am a big lover of Goodreads. I have many shelves on Goodreads, including a separate TBR owned shelf, which is distinct from my want to read list. So TBR owned is books, like it suggests, is books that I've physically bought already, but I have not read yet. And then I obviously have all of my read things, and I do keep that very up to date. I also do update kind of regularly with my page count at the end of each day. In terms of my thoughts on my books and tracking other things like various reading goals, I have a bullet journal. You guys know, you've seen it, I have an entire playlist that I'll try and link down below, but basically what I do is I always have some spaces where I can write out my thoughts on the books throughout the month, and I refer back to this for my wrap-ups. Question 3 is borrow. Do you lend your books out? Not really. I'm going to be entirely honest. I'm always quite reluctant to lend books out because they just overwhelmingly tend not to come back, but also because of that I'm not very happy to accept books that people lend me, because there's a fear that they're going to sit on my shelves for a while and I'm never going to give them back to that person. I do swap books with my dad quite often and my mum, but I trust them that they'll come back to me eventually. And obviously my partner and I kind of raid each other's bookshelves from time to time. That's not really a problem because we live in the same house. I do have a few friends who've got a few books of mine, and it's completely fine. You know, there is a concern that they're not going to come back, but equally, like, if I was that bothered, I could just go pick up another copy of that book, new and used, and it's not really that big a deal. But yeah, generally I try not to lend books out. Also, I have really weird reading taste and read really weird books in general, so it isn't always that there are many books that people want to borrow from me. Question 4 is buying. How do you buy or acquire your books? So like Pauline mentioned in her video, there is an entire tag about this now, created by Olive, called the Bougie Booktuber tag, which I have done and I will link down below. But generally I'm quite happy to buy either a mixture of new or used. I use a site called World of Books quite often, which is a second-hand site, and then we have both Heifers, which is like a sub-branch of Blackwell's, and also Waterstones in my hometown, and sorry, not my hometown, where I live now, Cambridge. And also I do go to a variety of independent bookstores. There's an amazing one in Ely called Topping & Co. I also have a Kindle and an Audible account, so Amazon does get a decent amount of my money through ebook sales and audiobook sales, but for the most part, if it's a physical book, I don't buy it from Amazon, I buy it from other platforms. 5, comments. How do you respond to the "how do you read so much" comment or similar comments? I did actually get one of these recently at work. One of the guys at work I was colouring in my book tracker reading, and he was like, "Is that all the books that you've read like in your life?" I was like, "No, it's all the books I've read this year, mate." And he was like, "What the fuck? That's like a book every 3 days." To be honest, with any of these things, it's a hobby. It's like anything else. Like, how do people rack up so many hours on video games? How do people get so good at some of the sports that they do? How do you do anything? You just prioritize it, you make time for it because it's something you enjoy. So, like, you know, a lot of it is a combination of being a very fast reader and also finding time to fit books in. So like, I will read on the way to and from work. I'll read for at least 20 minutes before I go to bed. Andy and I generally do tend to do that. I don't tend to get that comment too much anymore because, you know, that's fine. But yeah, so I think that my answer is always just like, it's like anything. If you prioritize it, you can do it. Question 6 is next book. How do you pick your next read? Since finding BookTube and making a BookTube channel, I am more conscious of things like to be read lists and kind of trying to curate my reading a little bit more. Having said that, I'm still a big mood reader at heart, so my TBR tends to be like a 50-50 chance of me actually getting through it. I tend to read like half of what I say I'm going to read in a month, and then the other half is just kind of things that take my fancy. But yeah, so that's generally it. This is why I've actually organised my to be read shelf in genre or vague genre a little bit more, so it's a little bit easier for me to find the kind of book that I'm in the mood for. So like when I really want to read historical fiction, I've now got them bundled up and collected. And I am quite conscious of trying to get through some of my backlist books as well as books that I have bought recently. Again, with any kind of book haul I do, I'd say I read like 50% of them fairly currently, and then 50% will be backlist stuff that I bought and haven't read for ages. Question 6 is travel. How do you pick what books you bring on vacation with you? Generally, it's just whatever's on my Kindle, because e-readers are incredible for going on holiday and they're amazing, and then it will just be whatever I'm currently reading at the time. I'm not one of these people who tries to desperately rush to finish things before certain deadlines, or at least I didn't used to be, and BookTube has kind of pushed me that way, and I'm trying to back off of that a lot more and just like allow books to drift from month to month and it be okay, and allow books to drift into readathons and it be okay. But yeah, so it's generally what is on my e-reader. I do use my Kindle a semi amount in real life, but in my day-to-day life. Vacations aren't real anymore. In my day-to-day life, but it is one that I do hold off for holidays a bit more. I think for holidays as well, saving books that you want to try and blitz in one go or in as few sittings as possible is really helpful, because I'm far more likely to be able to sit down and really dedicate the number of hours that I think it deserves. There are a few books on my shelves that I'm holding off on, actively holding off on reading, because I think that they are going to be a much better experience if there are fewer breaks, because you get that real immersion. Or for some of the classics, it's that getting into the writing style. That's one that does inform that decision as well. Question 8 is Annotate. Do you write or highlight or mark up your books in any way? Basically no. There are the odd book that I want to do a more in-depth video on that will involve making notes, but I will probably make those notes in a separate book rather than on the book itself. I'll make notes in a notepad somewhere. I think that comes from using so many library books through my university studies and getting really annoyed when people would annotate them and make their own markings and highlights, because this is a library book, it's not yours. Like, don't put your own thoughts on top of it. So I think there's just kind of a throwback to that. I'm not particularly precious about my books. I do dog-ear them. I you know, spines get bent, pages get broken, all that kind of thing. My rabbits take random chunks out of them, so it's not coming from like a point of being precious about the physical object. It's just not liking the idea of putting my thoughts at that particular moment in time stamped on top of it. The exception was I did highlight something in my Kindle once, and now I'm annoyed that I did, because I've got this like stupid your highlights or clippings folder that I can't get rid of. Question 9 is new or backlist. Do you prefer new or backlist books? Generally, I'm a backlist kind of person. I think since joining BookTube and being on it a bit more, I have read more new releases than I potentially have ever read in my life. But yeah, I am the kind of person who really enjoys random obscure books, and I'm just very bad at keeping track of like the publishing world, so unless it's part of a series and I'm aware of the next one coming out, I tend to ignore a lot of the new book hype kind of stuff happening. Also, just I read really obscure stuff, so even if it's like a new book, that doesn't mean it's I think new or backlist often just gets conflated with like hyped or not hyped, and like I've got some books that came out this year but nobody's talking about them, like nobody knows that they exist. It's not like they're not a big hot commodity on BookTube, they just happen to be new this year and I'm interested in reading them because I read random stuff. And then finally, sequels. Do you read books as they're released or wait for an entire series to be published before reading book one? I don't think I've ever consciously waited for an entire series and been like, oh, I want to get into that series, but I'm going to hold off for 3 years until the final book, because as with so many of the high fantasy series out there, you never know how many delays there can be. George R.R. Martin, we're looking at you. Philip Rothfuss, is that his name? The guy who wrote The Name of the Wind, we're looking at you. So yeah, I'll just end up picking up a book because I'm interested in it, and if it happens to be part of a series, cool. I'm generally quite bad at keeping up with series now. There have been 2 books that have come out this year as part of a series that I have yet to get through, even though I'm supposed to be super hyped and psyched about them. So yeah, that's quite poor form on my part. I'm also just very bad at continuing with series in general. I have many series on the back burner that at some point I might finish, but I think the series is such a huge commitment. I tend to read far more standalone books than anything in a particular series. And that is it from me. So I tag everyone. I hate tagging particular people. I just think if you want to do it, do it. And tagging does create a little bit of pressure of like feeling like you need to create that video quite soon because somebody's bothered to tag you, and feeling like you want to honor the fact that they've acknowledged you, but also having your own kind of schedule and things going on. So thank you so much, Pauline, for tagging me. It was very sweet, but it is something that I don't personally like to do for other people. So if you want to do this tag, go nuts, do it. And yeah, that's pretty much it from me. I'll chat to you soon. Have a wonderful reading week. Bye guys.